All right, 76.2 again. So the deal is this: we're going to make a one-sided bet. If the Democrats fail to take back the House, I will wear a MAGA hat for the next taping session. Or there may be a lot of recounts, you know, it may take a couple weeks, whenever it's finally decided who owns the House. If I lose, I'll wear the hat.
All right.
Even though hats make me look extra Jewy and they probably make my hair fall out. So I've been going to Studio City kind of neighborhood council meetings because I'm thinking about becoming involved in that. And I went to one a couple nights ago, and they had a Republican candidate for Congress and a Democratic candidate, and as they are wont to do, actually,
don't move your arm.
Sorry, the Republican was blaming California's troubles on Sacramento, where the seat of state government is, and that gave me the thought that you know, you can blame government, you can give government credit, or you can blame government for stuff, but beyond government, a lot of the problems we face and a lot of the solutions come from accelerating technology, and which is going to kicking everybody's butt now, and will increasingly just change everything. Which means that if I'm going to run for office, I think my platform is going to have to have something to do with making government better able to understand technology and work with science and technology. Because I mean, you look at the countries that have the greatest potential to kick our ass in the future: India and China. And then there are little countries that are super tech heavy, like Estonia has decided to be the most technologically advanced country in the world. This little country of what, 5 million people? And those countries, the countries that, you know, there were ways that throughout history that, you know, countries took over the world. England, with a little teeny island nation, I don't know, took over the world with what? Advanced maritime technology? How'd they do it? You know history.
They had their navy couldn't be beat. Their army was incredible, and they were always an advanced merchant country. In other words, their economy. They had a strong middle class that was not part of the nobility, that had grown very powerful from trade. And so that, coupled with an extremely powerful navy and very efficient army, allowed them and was a motivation for conquering other territories that they could use for resources.
So is it fair to say that their army and their navy and their products were
merchant class? Yeah.
That all these were kind of at the leading edge of technology for their time.
Well, the interesting thing is that in the 17th century, the further west you went, the more powerful was the merchant class, because power was more shared with other people. In other words, if you start in Russia with basically a czar and serfs, and then you go into Germany where there were these powerful nobility, these powerful electors. They called them electors, but they were dukes and princes. There was, the further west you went, the more of a middle class, the more merchants had power, until finally you got to England, where the merchant class was most powerful, and they were able to say, hey, you know, if we took over the West Indies, we could control all the spice trade and all the slave trade.
And so the merchants were competing to sell the best shit, I assume.
Yeah, before I forget, I just want to say something. I have to admit I was wrong about something. Do you mind if I interject real quick
Yeah,
before
go
I
ahead.
forget? The first is that I said in our last show that Lincoln won the election of 1864 because Sherman had captured Savannah. That's not true. He captured Atlanta. Savannah was a Christmas present that he gave to Lincoln a couple months later. Also, I said that the Civil Rights Act of 64 or 5 was passed was voted more by Republicans than Democrats. And Rick knew that that's because there were these Southern Democrats that voted against it. And I retorted that the Northern Republicans voted more in favor of it than than the Northern Democrats. That's not true. The Democrats in the North voted 10% more than the Republican legislatures in the North. So it was comparable. I was a little bit off.
The deal is that, I mean, people like to argue. If you go on Twitter, people will argue that the Republicans are the more liberal party because Lincoln freed the slaves 4 years ago. And parties change. They realign.
But Harry Truman might have been a member of the Klan. LBJ might have been a member of the Klan. And so there was some real problems with racism from the Democrat Party all the way up into the late 60s.
All right, but the late 60s are now 50 years in the past. And you got to look at the way the parties are today. All right, so, dang it, what was I talking about?
You were talking about how technology is going to change everything.
All right, so yeah, so
in Los Angeles.
Government, well, I mean, yeah, in Studio City, you know, it's hard to build. Well, it's not that hard. I can imagine doing a tech thing in Studio City. We're looking at the death of retail. All right, sorry. You know, it's hard to keep brick and mortar stores, go out all the time. You go to drive down Ventura Boulevard, which is the main drag in Studio City, and you see a lot of empty stores, empty storefronts. Now, if you could use those as business incubators, like new businesses, tech businesses, always need like a place to hang out and be like cool and modern and come up with their apps and shit. If you took empty storefronts and rented those to business developers, they're part of the community. If you made a deal with them that they get reduced rent until a new full-time retail tenant comes in, and then you can make another deal. They get reduced rent, which brings in some revenue until a full-time retail tenant comes back, if ever. And you also make a deal where, in return for this fairly cheap place to develop your business, you welcome kids from the community to apprentice with you and intern with you. Like, North Hollywood High is one of the highest ranked public high schools in the nation. They always kick ass on AP tests and getting into they have a magnet there for super smart kids and super hardworking kids. So if you set up a deal where we're giving you this cheap storefront, you get some cheap interns from North Hollywood High or from Walter Reed Middle School, which also has a high skills magnet. You could turn Studio City into a little Silicon Valley. I don't know if that's reasonable, but there you're marrying tech and government to some extent. But the deal is that government, that politicians should not be scientifically illiterate or hostile to science and technology. and should talk about problems and solutions that come from accelerating technology, because that is the greatest force for change in the world right now. Lance.
No, I have nothing to say. I actually do have something to say, but it's a little off subject, and I don't know if you want to talk about it. But,
go ahead.
Well, part of the reason that I'm not as impressed as you are with these things is that I don't think technology is going to change things as much as you do, because I think the problems human beings have been the same for millennia. And I agree, it's marvelous, all the inventions we have now, but I don't think it's going to change the way people feel about, they want to have kids, they want to have a good love life, they want to have a nice home to live in, they want to make enough money, they want vacations, they want spiritual development. And I don't know whether these inventions change things like that. So you're always talking about how the future people will have all these different freedoms, but doesn't fulfillment come from your philosophy and your personal relations with other humans?
Well, humans may not humans and what we want may not change so much over the next 500 or 1,000 years. But what will change is that unaugmented humans will be less and less in charge. And these hybridized, we're already semi-hybridized. We walk around with our tech attached to our hands, constantly consulting it. How many times does the average 22-year-old look at his or her phone in the course of a day? It's got to be hundreds of times. And we will become more and more intimately linked with technology that makes us better at navigating the world and processing information, until we're actually physically linked with the stuff. And we will also build stuff that has such powerful information processing ability that it will co-work with us. It's going to become a jungle of information processors, including new augmented versions of humans, and also, regular unaltered humans, traditionalist humans. And the number of humans will go up for the next 100 years till it's, the population goes from 7.6 billion now to 13 billion 100 years from now. But it's going to peak, and then it's going to, the unmessed with humans, the traditionalist humans, that population is going to stagnate or shrink, and all these other beings are going to dominate. And yeah, the traditional humans may continue to live mostly traditional lives, but there will be other lives being lived and cultures being built around not just traditional humans. And information wants to, computer guys like to say information wants to be free. But in addition to that, information wants to kick everybody's ass and change everything. All right, let's break.
All right.
Rolling.
All right, 76.3.
Do you have to have a heater on?
No, we can get rid of it. All right.
Just in terms of noise, maybe for this last session.
All right, we rolling still?
Yeah, we're still rolling.
All right, so
Oh,
you
shit.
changed my side. Tell us about it.
So
I'm sorry. There's a. Fuck. There's some sort of sound issue. I'll come.
76.3 again. We had a sound issue, I had to switch out some mic stuff. Luckily, in the sculptor's studio, there's a hand to hold the rejiggered mic. Lance, you messed with
All right. So what Rick pointed, I was quite proud of this. I don't know if we can show this image without glare, but Rick is looking a lot more three-dimensional. And the reason is that I added deeper, darker shading to the side of the torso. Now, if you look at some of the earlier shows, there is shading there, but it was much more illuminated. And it's probably, it was either because the other light may have given a different effect when we were using it, or if you look, turn toward the camera, if you put his arm against his side, there's more light that bounces off onto his side than when you pull his arm away. See, it's maybe you can see it's a little darker there than when he puts his arm right against it. See how that gets a little lighter? I don't know if you can see it. But anyway, what I did was I realized that his arm should be a little further away when I paint this section and get it darker. And by darkening this, it brought it up in line with the rest of the shadows, so this form is more sculpted. So the overall figure looks more 3D because...
Can you demonstrate to him again? Because it was like, we kind of...
All right, turn your body toward... Okay, now stand over here. All right, even more? Okay. Now, you see how this is pretty dark, right? Now, when he puts his arm next to it, when I put my hand next to this section, can you see a little light getting into his armpit?
Yes.
See, it's a little pinker in his armpit and brighter? That's bouncing off my hand. Now, when I pull my hand away, see how dark it gets? Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, anyway, what I realized was to keep his arm a little bit further away, which it should be, would actually give me darker shadows and make him more 3D. And in realism, every form that looks more 3D makes all the other forms look more 3D. It's a psychological thing.
So I'm 3D even though in real life I'm basically shallow.
That's what I've been trying to tell people.
So, people like if I talk about science every show for like 2 minutes. So I'm going to talk about coherence. That there's nothing that just purely exists. Like you can't imagine. I mean, you can imagine a universe that just consists of like a piston.
Can you talk about science without moving your hands around?
I don't know. We'll see. Because it makes no sense. How did the piston get there? It's got no history. It's just a piston floating in nothing because there's nothing besides the piston. A rule of existence, and maybe the primary rule of existence, is that things have to be self-consistent. And an associated principle is that the rest of the universe has to agree that that thing exists. That things have to have a history. Things that have zero history exist for zero time, and they don't exist. And things have to be self-consistent, unless you set up very special circumstances, where an apple can't be an apple some of the time and two apples the rest of the time. Things have to agree with themselves, even down to the scale of quantum mechanics, that you can't have electrons attached to nuclei unless what they call the orbital is, self-reinforcing. Every wavelength of an electron, every allowed path of an electron orbiting which isn't exactly what's happening, but a nucleus can be thought of as having an integer number of wavelengths. It has to agree with itself that it's in a stable orbit around the nucleus. It's kind of why numbers, counting numbers, are so useful, because you have numbers of things that are stable and consistent and based on being multiples of one, because you can't have things that are you can't have a fuzzy apple that is an apple some of the time and two apples other times, unless you've set up an experimental apparatus that's like Schrodinger's cat, that is part alive and part dead, at least as far as you know, because you're keeping it in a box and can't see its actual state. You could probably do Schrodinger's apple with an apparatus that is a box with either one apple or two apples in it, depending on some random quantum occurrence that's been hidden from you. And that's enough of that. So let's go on to, Jews for Jesus. We got some Jews for Jesus literature on our front porch, which I think most Jews find annoying. A Jew for Jesus Jews for Jesus is an organization of Jews who have started to believe in Jesus. Also, Mike Pence apparently invited a rabbi from Jews for Jesus, a rabbi who believes that Jesus was the Messiah, to give a blessing after the massacre of 11 Jews in Pittsburgh, which offended a lot of Jews. So in big cities, a lot of Jews, including myself, have been ambushed by somebody who comes up to you and is like, "Hey, fellow Jew." And you're like, "Hey," and it's all right because it's cool, Jew meet Jew. But it turns out, no, it's Jew meet Jew who's trying to get you to become Christian. It's a little bit bullshitty and a little bit annoying. Lance?
I don't really mind Jews that are for Jesus. I don't, because theoretically that is what the Christian religion is designed to do, and that is to complete Jews' journey. That's what they believe, and more power to them if they want to believe that. So it doesn't bother me. I don't think there's much danger that the Jewish people will just disappear, which is what a lot of Jews' secret fear is, that we're already assimilating, and most Jews are not faithful to the faith. They're just ethnically Jewish. So a lot of Jews are afraid that Jews will convert away into non-existence. But that I'm not that worried about that. And I think that my feeling about Jesus is that there is a great deal of beauty and wisdom in the Christian religion, and so it doesn't bother me that people believe in it. But I have a mystical view of Christianity that differs from that of Christians. So what I think is that the story of Christ is a symbolic story about all of us and all of our lives, which means it's extremely powerful because it has significance to everybody. And I also think on some spiritual level that is difficult to explain, all of us are Christ or share in the story of Christ. But that doesn't mean that I worship Jesus the way that a Christian would. So I think that Christians made the story of Christ into, we're going to worship Christ, he's the Messiah. And I think the real story of Christ is that all of us have a divinity within us, and that when two people meet one another, it's Christ meeting Christ. It's Messiah meeting Messiah. Because in a real sense, the way people get closer to God is by the way they treat one another. So you are the Messiah to everyone you meet, as is everyone to you. In other words, the goal of a Messiah is to get you closer to God. And in every interaction you have, you're getting closer to God, because you're having an exchange of a spiritual exchange with everyone you meet, depending on how you treat them. If you treat them well, if they treat you badly. So my theory is that we're all either Christ or his crucifier. And so we're constantly reliving that story. So in a sense, I don't mind the story of Christ being repeated by Jews. If they're getting something spiritual out of it, who knows? You know, everybody's path is a little different. Maybe there are Jews getting closer to God through the story of Christ. I don't think that's impossible.
Okay. Here's a story of sexual harassment on the front page of the LA Times, which makes me feel like I'm a very old guy because things have changed so much.
What did you think of my thoughts when I held forth on Jesus?
I think I'm a terrible Messiah because...
no, I'm just kidding. I know you didn't want to say anything.
No, because how I yell at every other driver around me, it's not Christ-like.
Well, but see, I think that all of our actions are affecting people, even the cruel things we do. Because I think we're just as much his crucifier as him. I think we're both. And that's what confuses people. Yeah. But I think evil actions spiritually awake people as well.
Yeah, I also wondered what would happen in a fight between Jesus and Moses. And then I remembered, I think, that the very first episode of South Park, when it was just a Christmas prank, was based on a fight between Jesus and Santa Claus. So, I don't know. So I had a bunch of garbagey thoughts is what happened.
All right, let's go to your thing now.
So,
you had an article you read?
So in May, they were shooting a pilot, a TV pilot, and which required an actress to be in bed with an actor. With them, they're both wearing underpants, and then the actress is beyond that is just wearing like nipple shields, modesty shields. And you know, it's at the end of a love scene, and the actor takes the actress's hand. I'd call her an actor because everybody's an actor now, whether they're an actor or an actress, but it just makes it clear to call her an actress. Takes her hand, puts it on the front of his shorts to show her that he's popped a boner. And then he hits on her later in her dressing room. And the whole story is about how difficult it was for her to report this act of sexual abuse. The SAG had a hard time handling it, and the producers of the pilot, nobody really knew what to do and how to go about doing it, and how much trouble the guy should be in. And it just made me think that if this had happened in 1974, when I was 14, it would have been just considered, yeah, of course, they had a love scene. The guy got a boner. Of course he's going to put her hand on his boner or something. And it would have been, you know, the woman would have felt gross because of what had happened to her, but would have probably just you know, wouldn't have reported it, and you know, most people would not have considered it much, you know, like an actionable thing. And you know, 44 years later, things are much different, which I think is okay. It's just, it makes me feel old because I can imagine things being, you know, from a previous time.
I just think that there are a lot of things now that are being decided by the courts that should be decided between the people on the set. You know, it would be terrific if everybody could read everybody's mind, but when you're in a situation where people are holding each other in intimate situations, I think a lot of complicated things happen that can be confusing. And now, I'm not saying that the guy should be spoken up for, but I'm just saying, is it possible that he thought that maybe she was not acting?
Well, she's married.
Maybe, yeah, but maybe he got the feeling that she wanted him or liked him, and we don't know his side of it. Not that, I mean, if it's just him being a pig, then he's just a pig and needs to be punished in some way. But how do we know that he just didn't get the wrong idea? Even though they're acting, they're actually doing it. So it's they're actually necking.
Well, actually, to be clear, they were shooting a post coital scene. So I don't think they actually shot the scene where they were faking making love. I think it was just post. But really, like you need to get clearance before you take somebody's hand that you're not in a relationship with and put it on your boner.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. Now that when we went over this before, I didn't realize that. I mean, that's pretty awful. Except, you know, I just think to myself, maybe this isn't something for a court of law.
Well,
maybe this is something between him, the director, the woman, the actor. Maybe they can work it out without. I mean, maybe he could be fired or.
The article pretty much explains how they couldn't work it out. How she tried various things to get some action to be taken, and like nobody knew what to do and how far to take it, and how this is still like a new area.
Well, what would happen if they were simulating sex and he'd gotten an erection? Then what? I mean, what I'm saying is it's some of these things are just absurd. What if they had been simulating sex and he'd gotten an erection? Then
well, that happens, and I would assume, I've never, been in, I mean, obviously, I've never simulated sex. But
that happens in every movie now.
No. It happens less now than in movies of 20, 30 years ago.
People having sex, I see it in every movie. I mean, it's like I can't get away from it. There's constantly people simulating sex. Are you saying they're all married?
No, I'm saying that it happened more in previous decades, but I assume that that people either develop understandings or are offended or not. That you hear actors talking about having done love scenes where like the person they were with had bad breath, or that person the person did kind of get aroused and either avoided presenting it or just went with it. And you mentioned when we were talking about this off camera There was a movie that, I don't know if it was part of viral marketing or just a rumor that went around for many years afterwards, that the movie Wild Orchid with Mickey Rourke and Carrie Otis, who were dating at the time, there was a rumor that during their simulated love scene that they were actually having sex, which made a mediocre movie somehow seem more awesome than it actually was. And there were several other movies of the era where that was rumored.
And then I remember saying to you that I have a theory that a lot of actors want to be filmed having sex. That it amuses them that they don't mind being filmed having sex.
Well, and then you said that you've painted 3 couples.
What happened was, now I can't run for office. No, what happened was I've had 3 couples come to me and ask if I could draw them naked, kind of fooling around. So I've never actually, now I'm adjusting my collar, that's a dead giveaway. I've never actually painted people having sex, but I think if they had been capable, they would have gone ahead and had me paint them that way. And I was fine with it. I mean, I don't mind if it didn't bother me. All 3 couples were married or living together in I'll tell a story, okay? I'm very outspoken. And as some of you know, I don't mind saying the wrong thing. And it's been a problem my whole life, because very often I'll blurt something out and I'll get punished for it. And I just can't help myself. I just have to say what's on my mind. And one time there was this couple that they gave me the request. They wanted me to draw them while they were having sex. And it happened to be 2 gorgeous lesbians. And one of them was tall and blonde with huge breasts, and the other one was, she had long blonde hair, and the other one was smaller but more pixie-like, and she had short brown hair, but she was equally beautiful in her own way. And they were rolling around in my bed upstairs, and the important part of the story is that even though I'm incredibly outspoken, I did not say that I was against gay marriage. I managed to keep that to myself the whole time. That's all.
Okay.
All right. So what's the next topic?
I don't know. This was going to be the night where, I feel bad every time I help. I watch one of our episodes, because that happens to both of us. We get angry and anxious that we're making our points, and our voices get really high with anxiety. And tonight was going to be the night that I kept my voice, low and rumbly and manly.
All right.
But
so we're not going to get excited.
Yesterday night was the end of daylight savings time, and I don't think I'm the first person to make this observation, but the nights get short. I mean, the days get short, and the nights get long and cold, and I think that's why we have our best holidays. We have during the winter. We have at the beginning of winter, at the fall into winter, we have our first candy holiday, Halloween, and then in the middle of winter we have our second candy holiday, Valentine's Day, and then we have our family feast holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. I think we put put all our holidays, our best holidays, in fall and winter, so we don't kill ourselves, because winter sucks.
I think what's interesting to me is that there was a time when Thanksgiving was more popular, but people don't get along with their families that much, first of all. And it turns out that the most popular holiday today, these days, is Halloween, not Christmas. And I think it's because what's happened is the country has become more secular. And so it's much more fun to dress up and for adults to participate in Halloween than the Christmas holiday, which is a religion people don't believe in as much, and it's more for children. So I think people are find Halloween to be more interesting, and people are more attracted to the message of Halloween, which is sort of a I don't know, fun to be bad kind of message.
I don't know. You could Halloween up Christmas. You could go to family dinner dressed as a naughty nurse.
Interesting. But I actually think that it's kind of telling that Halloween is now the most popular holiday. And I actually, I sometimes think that because there are so few real adventures in life anymore, that more and more people are dressing up as things. In other words, when you just got back from World War II, you did not need to dress up as a soldier or a pirate or anything like that. You'd already been through that. So
yeah, there were a lot of pirates in World War II.
Yeah, well, they'd already experienced, that kind of violence. So I think more and more people are playing roles that they have, no experience with. Because there's life is so controlled, life is so safe. I don't know.
All right, should we call for Voltaire? I think we've run out of stuff.
Yeah, let's call for Voltaire.
Okay. I have a short road.
Okay. All right. So I guess we're just going to say subscribe.
What about the Patreon idea? Should we mention it now?
Yeah. So we haven't made any money off of this thing. We'd like to make, $10 or $20 a month. So we may sign up for Patreon, where if you like what we're doing and if you want special goodies from us, you can send us a few bucks a month. So let us know what you think.
I got an idea, actually, and here's the idea, and that is on Patreon you offer people little works of art or something, and if anybody's interested in a cheap work of art, like a little drawing or something, just message me in the comments, and maybe we can work something out. So that's my suggestion. And all of you Republicans, go out and vote. It's just 3 days away, and let's hope to God.
It's not 3 days away, it's 1 day away.
Oh, is it? All right. So let's hope we can save the country from the socialist decline.
Yeah.
Remember Venezuela.
The opposite of what he said. Let's give the country a 2-year break where we have enough stalemate that we don't have to worry about what our government's up to every single day. Remember, the good old days when you didn't have to turn on the news channels to see what some government official had gotten up to?
Just one last thing. I was talking to a woman that had been a Marine in Iraq. And I said, so you're going to vote for the Republicans? Trump can't? She said, no, I think I'll vote for the Democrats. I don't like this Trump guy. And I said, you remember ISIS? And she said, yeah. I said, did you know that Trump crushed ISIS this year? That there's hardly any of them left? That we stacked them up like cordwood. We killed 50,000 of them. We retook all the cities. We stopped the slave auctions. Don't interrupt me. And she said, no, I didn't know that. I said, really? So don't you think it's strange that here is a person that was in the Marine Corps in Iraq, and the Democrat control of the media is so strangling, so strong, that they could keep Americans from realizing that we just won a war because they don't want Trump to look good. Even someone that had participated and would therefore have an interest in it. Is America being served well by a media that hides important things like that?
How much more time do we have? 10 minutes. Okay, that's time enough to break and then see what the coverage has been.
No, we don't have to break and see what the coverage has been. It should have been on every American's lips. Wait, there shouldn't have been a single American that didn't know that we crushed ISIS this year, that we won a war. And yet, if I talk to 100 Democrats, probably none of them have heard about it. They just remember vaguely something about ISIS, and that was it.
I want to break, and I want to come back and...
You don't have to look anything up. Call up 5 Democrats and say, do you know we defeated ISIS this year? It was a massive victory.
Let's see what the media has said, because...
the media can say all kinds of things on the internet. That's not my point. They made sure that every single American believed or heard that Trump was a racist. But none of the Democrats I've talked to, not one of them, knew that we had defeated ISIS.
Let's see what the landscape...
But all of them know that Trump is a racist that colluded with Russia.
Let's see what the media landscape is about ISIS.
You won't find out on the internet.
Because you're saying you're presenting as if it's a final and complete victory, but ISIS is still blowing up shit here.
Yeah, because they've been reduced from a caliphate that owned territory the size of a large European country.
You argued with me
they've gone from
the territory in the desert doesn't fucking matter.
No, but their army's been wiped out. There are remnants of them they're now the same level as a small terrorist organization. Whereas before they had an economic minister and they were making billions selling oil. They had an army of 50,000 men, and it's all gone now.
Let's see. Find me the articles that say 50,000 men are gone. Just show it to me.
It's because you don't believe it either. That's what amazes me. Wait a minute. You're so badly informed by your media that this is all like a surprise to you. You're like a duck that's been hit on the head. Like, what? We won a war?
Let's take a break.
Because you don't believe
me, right?
All this shit. No, but it's incomprehensible to you, right?
No,
you really don't believe it. You don't believe me. No. We did not defeat ISIS. Is that what you think?
I want to. I like numbers.
I don't.
You just gave me a number.
No.
And I want to know how much.
What if it turns out to be 35,000 or 61,000? Does it really? My point is this. Did you know that we defeated ISIS this year?
You're saying it as if it's conclusive.
So you're saying we didn't defeat ISIS? We did not crush ISIS.
I want to see the fucking media on it. You show me your sources. I'll see.
No, but it's like we're arguing about whether the moon exists. This is what bothers me. This is why you guys have a chance to win the House this year, because you're so badly informed. Well, I have to prove.
Show me your sources.
I have to prove to you.
Yeah, you do. Okay, like you know what? You fucking do. You have. Sorry.
He struck me. What are you, in Antifa now?
All right, come on. Let's show me the fucking sources.
Okay. Did we defeat ISIS this year?
4. 76.4. All right. So one thing from last week, Lance said that by far the majority of catch and release undocumented immigrants never show up again once they get processed and they're told just come back for further hearings. Lance said that like 95% of people never show up again, and we did some research, and the statistics are messy, and there's a bunch of different categories, but it's more the other way. The majority of undocumented aliens who are initially processed and told to come back later actually do come back. Now, the number Lance kind of came upon was 65% as an overall number, and I've seen other numbers that are in the range of 80%, and Lance, I think, would argue that even 10% not coming back, or 5%, or whatever, but most people come back to their hearings because they are interested in becoming citizens. They don't just run away to try to disappear into the American countryside. Lance?
Okay, I wish you hadn't changed the subject,
No.
but Rick found a statistic. Okay, the statistics can mislead people, like unfortunately Rick has been misled, and the reason is that it depends on which category of illegal alien you're talking about. For example, 90% of the illegal aliens that are being monitored by ICE will come back if they've got a handler, and I believe they even have some sort of electronic monitoring, like an ankle bracelet. But many thousands, the vast majority of children that are unattended disappear into the United States and are taken in by families. Some of them are just gone. We don't even know where they are. There is a number of 167,000 in families that have disappeared into the U.S. Now, I did see two statistics. One that 65%, anywhere between 60 and 85% of people do come back for a hearing, but it depends on, then the question is, when do they come back? Do they come back? Because the process can take 3 years, and some of them come back for one hearing, but maybe not for the next one.
I'll give you that. I mean, if the hearings go on for frickin' ever, you may lose people over years. But back to ISIS quickly.
Wait. Just to cap it off, though, it's important to understand that regardless of which statistic you read, if you read if you read several different types of illegal alien, several different types of benchmarks, coming back, disappearing, whether they're children, whether they're families, ultimately millions of illegal aliens are not coming back. They are melding into our society without any way of the U.S. stopping them. And I'm sorry, but some come back, but that doesn't solve the problem.
All right.
As far as ISIS goes, Rick, you want to say what your conclusion is?
My conclusion is that, okay, we saw some articles that said 50,000 were killed under Obama. I'll give you another 50,000 killed under Trump. I'll also give you a more complete territorial collapse of ISIS under Trump, where ISIS lost, it's hard to go with territory, we've talked about that before, but ISIS lost 30 to 40% of its territory under Obama, but has lost like 93% or more from when they were at their peak under Trump. So they lost most of their territory under Trump.
ISIS by January of 2017, ISIS had lost 93% of its territory. For example,
wait, by January of 2017?
Yeah, this is 2017. So by now, they may be even less.
But
for example, in January of 2017, 35,000 ISIS fighters controlled an area the size of Pennsylvania. By January of 2017, it was down to 1,500, controlling 2,000 square miles.
Except Trump didn't become president until January of 17. So that 93% that disappeared before he became president, according to what you just read.
No.
If you want to amend
This article is December 27th,
but you just
2017. So that's a whole year.
you just said January.
That's a whole year. January of 2000. This article was, in January, the beginning of 2017, when Trump took office, there were 35,000 fighters controlling an area the size of Pennsylvania. By December, a year later, they were down to 2,000 square miles and 1,500 ISIS troops.
All right. So
and since then, they've gotten even smaller. So ISIS was crushed by Trump.
Well, but there were 50, according to the articles, 50,000 killed under Obama. You're saying they're at 35,000 when Trump takes over.
But that's only in this one area.
Well, anyway, they each killed tens of thousands of ISIS fighters, both presidents.
Okay, but they were powerful when Trump took over. They had 35,000 troops. That's a big army, and they controlled an